This week in Arsenal, the Gunners come back from 1-0 down to beat Southampton 3-1 at the Emirates. Bukayo Saka goes nuclear. Kai Havertz plays like Game 6 LeBron. And Manchester City did not win against the Premier League in their arbitration case. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Saka! That is a diamond of a goal!
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 73. As always, I'm your host, Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. And we've got a couple things to talk about today. It is Tuesday, October 8th. And, we're coming to you live a few days after Arsenal's comeback win against Southampton. I really wish it wasn't a comeback win, but I'll take the win, I guess. I'll take the 3 points. We'll get into that. There's also a few performances that myself and our illustrious guests want to dissect, and we'll do that as well. And then there is a small matter of the quote-unquote final award for the Manchester City arbitration case against the Premier League concerning associated party transactions. I promise it's more exciting than it sounds. Also, I think, real quick, I think the term final award is very misleading because I don't think City were awarded anything, really, at this point in time. I think there might be a fine the Premier League have to pay. We'll see about all that. Anyway, with me to talk about all those things are two really illustrious guests. I'm very excited about both of them, and I know you guys are too. So first is Chitty, who you can follow on Twitter at ChittyAFC. Chitty, how are you doing, my friend? Welcome back.
Yeah, doing good. It's actually been quite busy last couple of days, but always have time to talk about Arsenal. So happy to be back on here again.
I appreciate it, man. Busy times.
Yeah.
And also joining us is George V, who you can follow on Twitter at GeorgeV_AFC. George, good to have you back as well. How are you doing?
Amazing, bro. It's a good time to be an Arsenal fan. I think there are things coming together, and I always like to take a step back. I feel like every international break, everybody likes to ask either who's your world-class legend, who's the best player in the world, and all these things get started. So it's always lovely when the football's not here to talk non-football things. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be here, mate.
Yeah. I think podding during the international break is actually underrated. I know some podcasts like to take the couple weeks off because there isn't any football going on. I do think it's a great time to, like you said, just kind of sit back, take a look at things from, like a bird's eye view, talk big picture, maybe dive into things a little bit more than you probably would have time to do when the games are coming thick and fast. So, I'm excited actually to do this episode and to talk next week as well during the international break. Let's just get the hits and misses out of the way real quick. And then there are some parts of this game I really want to dive into, but there are some specific performances that I think we should pick out through here. So for those of you who are just joining us, who are not familiar with this concept, with this segment that we do on here, hits and misses, basically hits are, your winners, your stock risings, those players who you're coming out of a match feeling a little bit better about, a little higher on, guys who impressed you. And then the misses are, the quote unquote losers, the stock fallings, the guys who you're a little bit more concerned about. Maybe there's something you spot in their game, something about their performance that you're just a little bit more worried about moving forward. So, George, I'll let you have the honor of hitting us with your first hit from the match. And which player impressed you?
I don't know if we're going to get right into it. I mean, Bukayo Saka, we have to have a conversation about this boy. Who's becoming a man, and just it's in your title in terms of him going nuclear, but I would like to have conversations about, is he not at this current moment and in this form the most complete attacker in world football? And, you have a look at what he's doing on the pitch in terms of, I think, being the only player in Europe's top 5 leagues to kind of have above 10 tackles, above 10 big chances created. Whether you look at chances from open play, I think he's second in Europe's top 5 leagues with like 17. He's the first for chances created from set pieces. He's on track to do something pretty historic in terms of doing an 8th assist in a row. In the league. And, I have a look at him and I'm thinking, there's something different and arrogant about you and your play. I think he's always been a highly efficient player, but the way that I would describe Bukayo is that, everybody loves him and he's still, maybe it's kind of the facial structure that makes him look like a kid, and people want to baby brother him too much, but there is a killer forming and there's a very arrogant narrative forming from him about winning things. And that has been a very big push. And I think when you have a look at kind of that right-hand side and you have a look at what Bukayo Saka specifically was able to do in this match, it was incredible. This comes off the back of, for me, what's been a very impressive last couple of weeks and an incredible start to the season from him specifically. I think the way that he took control of the game was frightening, to be honest with you. He was toying with Southampton. And I think the one new thing that I've seen from Saka is that he's always been so efficient with whatever role and whatever we're asked of him. Again, ironically, I think Arsenal fans actually underrate the commentary on Bukayo Saka as much as he's brilliant. I don't know if we talk about the brilliance enough because we just expect it. We expect this guy to basically be a 9 out of 10 consistently, but we don't talk about, I think, his ability to create separation enough. For me, that has been the biggest difference, where his dribbling has become a lot more creative. Before, it used to be just incredibly efficient. But now I'm looking at things where he stopped and toying with his opponent, almost dangling the ball before then bursting past him. And, I just think that we're seeing a more creative Bukayo Saka in general, and a more direct Bukayo Saka that's more concerned with bringing the game to opposition as opposed to exploiting things that he already sees, which means I think far too often last season, we would try to run the ball to Saka and the end goal would be to get the ball to Saka. But it seems as though Bukayo Saka is taking more ownership this season in terms of saying, I'm going to get on the ball and I'm going to make something happen, regardless of what game state we're in. And it's just incredibly exciting because, mate, when we talk about this young Arsenal squad, one of the biggest things I kept repeating is, when they start believing they're the superstars that they are, a frightening exponential jump is going to happen. And I just feel like, again, it's the boy from Hale End that exemplifies that more than most in the squad.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point about how his dribbling has gotten a little bit more creative recently. Because I did notice where it's kind of similar to how when Martinelli was kind of coming up through the ranks under Arteta, he had one gear for a while, and then he learned to do the bit of stop start to kind of shift gears a little bit, change up the speed. Obviously Saka is doing something, several levels above that at this point, but like you said, he's kind of holding the ball out there, kind of almost trying to bait defenders into making the first move. And then, I think at this point it's pretty well established. He can go inside on his left and wreak havoc from there, or he can get to the touchline on his right and, play the cut back, play the cross from there, or just get himself into a shooting position as well. And I was really impressed, especially by this performance, not just because, he had the 2 assists and a goal, or how he, handled a 2v1 matchup with ease, but he did that without any support from right back as well, which I think is really impressive. And I haven't heard that talked about all that often, but Thomas Partey, because his hamstrings are made of paper mache, it was just kind of sitting back at right back, which is fine. I'm not holding that against him or anything, but he was sitting at right back, not offering that kind of support that Timber or White would for Saka, and still he managed to kind of do it almost himself, and really have a gigantic impact on the match. But Chitty, what did you make of Saka's performance? And kind of to George's point, where do you think he ranks currently among right-sided forwards in in Europe's top 5 leagues, just Europe generally.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of points, George. But the point you said about Saka's dribbling, I've like noticed it as well. Like I think even from the first game against Wolves, where there was a moment where like he did some like nice skill where he flicked it between both his feet and then got a shot away, and I was like, I've never seen you do that before. But he sort of add in sort of more like it's some of the criticism that sometimes people have of him is like, oh, his dribbling's not very, interesting, basically. But like, he's always been like an effective sort of player, and he always makes the right decision. But his dribbling's never been really the most stylish. But I feel like he's added a bit more to his arsenal. You see sometimes, like I think against Bolton, where he sort of just slowed the play down completely, did the sort of fake shot down the outside, and like literally froze the defenders before getting the ball in, and that led to the Sterling goal. I think he's doing a bit more of he believes that like he is the best player on the pitch now every time he steps on the pitch. And I think that has sort of been building over the years, of course. And even from the Euros as well, sort of how he like fought off the competition. I mean, there was never any competition for his place, but there was a whole doubt about, oh, should he be the one playing at right wing? And he showed what he did during the Euros, especially the game against Switzerland, where he literally took England on his back, got them back into the game. And I think the confidence from there has just been building and building. And you've seen what he is doing right now. I think he's gone up another level this year. I think his performance levels, I don't see another right winger in the world doing what he is doing at the moment in terms of all-round play, especially when you think about he is still contributing defensively as well, which a lot of the other, the best right wingers aren't really doing as much as he is doing. He is still coming back. He is still doubling up with the right back, everything like that. So I think when you consider he's doing all of that and still being so productive on the other end, I think, yeah, I wouldn't take any other right winger over him. I know people talk about Yamal, what he's doing and everything, but I still think that Saka's got another dimension to him in terms of output, especially. I think Yamal is going to be the best right winger probably at some point, but I think right now Saka is still number one. And yeah, Salah's still there, but I think Saka overall play is better than Salah is right now. So yeah, I wouldn't swap him for anyone, of course, but even bias aside, I wouldn't swap him for anyone.
Yeah. I mean, I found this graphic that Sky Sports was going over earlier today, and it was talking about Saka's ranking in a few stats among Europe's top 5 leagues, right? Assists, he's got 7 already, first in the top 5 leagues, that is. Big chances created, 12, that's number 1. Assists from open play, 5, that's number 1. Assists from set pieces, 2, number 1. Chances created, 27, he's second. So, we're looking at a guy who currently is probably the greatest creative force in European football at this point in time. So, yeah,
I don't think we should be even surprised by this though, because even from his first season as a pro, he's always been a very good creator. Yes, at left back it was a different sort of role. He was sort of just going down the outside, crossing it in. But I think every season his creative numbers have always been like very good, even before his goal scoring numbers sort of caught up as well. I think creatively he's always been a very good player, and you see his assist numbers in the Premier League. He's already got like 42 assists at the age of 23, which is already, I can't remember where he is in the rankings, but like he's already passed some like all-time greats in the Premier League. He passed Robert Pires.
That's been his base profile. I mean, The odd thing is like people sit there and talk about Saka as an output merchant when ironically that's not his strength. It's what he became because that's what the team needed or at least what Arsenal needed. At baseline, this is a guy who is probably one of the most intelligent footballers in the world in terms of what he recognizes space, in terms of what he recognizes passing wise. I mean, guys, are we sitting there not understanding that this is a boy who is only 23 and is doing this right now? Like, I think sometimes we don't understand, but he's on track in the next 30 games. He could outpace Cristiano Ronaldo's Premier League record of output whilst being the most defensive winger in the world. Are we understanding that? Like it's honestly, to me, it's mental. Every time I try to contextualize it, I try to put myself on the ground. But you know what? Why is it that Arsenal fans can't prop up what, for me, he factually is the best creator in Europe? You've reeled off those stats, so that's just objectively true. And
Yeah.
we're talking about a winger that objectively has done the most defensive dual numbers, by the way, in Europe's top 5 leagues. There's no one that comes close. And by the way, I include that even in our own team. If you actually look at our own team consistently, even in 22, 23, and in previous years, Saka does the most defensive work, even more than Martin Odegaard in certain areas. So it's just, for me, it's not spoken about enough. And I have a feeling that part of this, and maybe it's a discussion, but you look at what he's doing now in terms of who's out of the team and the redundancy down that side, and is he benefiting from having more touches inside? Is Saka benefiting from being somebody that we go through more? And that is a debate. I don't think it's entirely true that it's because of people missing that we're seeing this type of Saka. I think this is just a natural progression for me in terms of his career. Now was the time for me that I thought, okay, it's time for you to be the Ballon d'Or candidate that I really feel that you have the potential to be. But yeah, mate, I think Saka is going to a different level, and I don't want to hear any other names beyond really Salah. And I'll be honest, I don't think Lamine Yamal is fair. I'll be really fair with you because I think he's been doing a brilliant campaign, but he's off the back of a brilliant 12 months. If we're really going to be serious about what his sample has been, Bukayo Saka has done this for years in the international stage, being England's best player for years, by the way, in multiple tournaments. He's been one of England's brightest players for years, by the way. And, he's leading an Arsenal team, again, at 23 to back-to-back title challenges. And he's doing things. And if we are to beat Manchester City, let's be clear, it's still a great side. I've seen a lot of talk, and we'll get into the whole Manchester City perspective, but guys, let's not, downplay what Arsenal are attempting to do against Manchester City and Pep, even this year. It's still pretty great. So yeah, I think Bukayo Saka deserves his plaudits. There's really not much more you can say.
No. I mean, just an amazing player. Fully deserves to captain the side right now in Odegaard's absence. And I think that's the highest compliment you can give right now, is that this isn't really a surprise to us. What he's doing at the moment is just a natural progression of how good he's been.
Is there a better story, really quickly? Like, I hate narrative, but football loves this. But is there a better story that you guys have seen? Say we were to do something very special this year in terms of beating Pep, and it comes really, and I'm going to put Bukayo Saka as the poster boy for this, coming from Hale End, dragging your team from where we were to the top of the English Premier League crown as an academy graduate. Like, is there a better story? Do we have a better, even in Arsenal? I mean, I look at Jack Wilshere. That's maybe the closest comparison that we've got. I think Cesc Fabregas is a little bit difficult because he's come from Barcelona and he obviously did great things. But is there a better story that we've seen, from an academy graduate rebuilding an elite footballing club that was from shambles to the peak of trophies? I don't know.
I think the fact that he was the best player throughout as well makes it special.
Yeah.
Is that, like, you could say, oh, we weren't a very good team when he was our best player, but we leveled up. He leveled up at the same time, and it kept going on. And he's still our best player to this day. So for him to take us throughout the whole journey, I think, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, since the day he broke into the team, we've been having conversations about we have to go to the next level and match this guy's growth, right? And we had a period of time where, Liverpool and City and United were talking, not the clubs, but their fan bases were talking about coming in and signing Saka because they knew that he was going to outgrow the club at some point, or they thought he was, based on the club's trajectory at that time. So yeah, I can't think of a better story than that if we were to go on and win the Champions League or win the Premier League, or fingers crossed, a combination of the two. I mean, that's automatic legend status, even if it's just one Premier League. I mean, I think that's an automatic trophy automatic statue in front of the Emirates. So I mean, it's fairy tale stuff, really. So Chitty, how about you give us your hit from the match?
I guess we should go for the other obvious one, because I think Havertz was unbelievable. And I think a lot of people have been talking about Havertz last few days, and especially talking about his mentality, which I think is really something that has to be brought up, in terms of the fact that like when we went 1-0 down, like it was like he was the one who was the most pissed off about it. Like he was fuming at that point, and it like a new energy sort of came into him, and the way he just sort of drove us back into the game, and just that whole second half performance was just amazing. And I think you're just seeing the growth in terms of, like, I think someone tweeted like the last season game week 7, he was getting a sympathy penalty against Bournemouth to get his first goal for Arsenal, and then this season he's basically dragging us by the scruff of his neck to get us back into that game and ultimately win the game. And he is basically gone from a sort of, people thought he'd be like a luxury sort of addition, to now he is like the heart and soul of this Arsenal team almost. He is like one of the main guys and one of our best players at the moment. And I think, yeah, just seeing what he's doing, especially like the stuff that he wasn't really good at before in terms of like, you know, getting on the ball, the driving of the ball, showing the confidence. There was one moment where he like drove through like 3 players and had a shot, got a shot away, and you're like, wow, he would never do that like 12 months ago. So I think seeing that sort of thing, and obviously the finish as well was basically like a finish of a really, really top striker. So seeing that he's getting the numbers and he's also showing the all-round play as well, I think, yeah, I couldn't be happier with him at the moment. So yeah, real hit now.
Yeah. I think hasn't he equaled his goal contributions for Chelsea
Yeah,
at this,
in the
at
Premier
this
League,
point in time? And like,
I think he needs one more. Like I think he has 26, and I think he's at 20. But yeah, pretty much in in like half the amount of games or something like that. Like he's played 44 games for us, and I think with Chelsea he played 90 games. So yeah, look, the biggest thing that I'll say with Kai Havertz is I think for me it's just the aggression in possession. I call it as my little rhyme for him. But have a look at like the way he's attacking channels, the way even the ball striking. For example, look at that goal in isolation. 8 months ago, Havertz doesn't take the chance like that. And by the way, it was coming. There was a period in the match, like 10 minutes before his goal, where he literally had the exact same chance. And he goes for the shot, and it's not a great shot, but I'm like, oh gosh, it's coming. If he can just consistently attack situations for me, then you're going to see a Kai Havertz that's going to be a very interesting player. You know, his record alone, you can't talk about already. I mean, he's already in some very crazy conversations if you actually look at his record as a center forward in terms of his output. It's something like even in the 20 games that he's played, he's got 20 goals and assists in terms of output. So he's already in crazy conversations if you want to look objectively at output. But the biggest thing for me is if he's going to consistently be aggressive in possession, because I've seen it out of possession. I've seen him work hard. That's never been for me a debate, even when he was going through his worst spell. I mean, people would say, okay, there's clearly stuff to work on, but, you know, out of possession, I didn't realize how willing of a tackler and even a worker that he was. And, you know, I think now the biggest change has been adding that in possession. And that translates, by the way, look at his goal the other week in terms of the header. He attacks that space. And again, it's a ball that he attacks willingly. As soon as, for me, Kai Havertz is reserved in possession, that's what frustrates me the most. But what I've seen recently in the way that he's running off the back of Bukayo Saka, even on the outside, in terms of him taking that shot, the way that he takes charge and really attacks goal and is very vertical. He's not being, second guessing himself, really. You actually ironically saw the opposite with Jesus in this match as you did with Kai Havertz, where one player is being very aggressive in possession and sure of his actions, and another player is coming deep, indecisive, and potentially wasteful, trying to do too much. And they're at different journeys in their mental journeys, ironically, but they could both learn from each other in terms of that journey. And I really think that Kai Havertz, if he can continue to do this, he's going to reach different levels of how we're going to talk about him. And I'll be honest, it's not something I expected personally that he would be able to solve. I think everybody could look at Kai Havertz and as a profile, they say, wow, there's a lot to like. But there was a lot of fears whether or not he could deal with the aggression and the contact from behind, if he could deal with being aggressive when he's got the ball. Because there's been a lot of really good things about Kai Havertz, but he never quite always gives you that clinical edge. And for me, I don't even need it. What I need is that clinical aggressiveness. Because if he's going to be this aggressive, I guarantee you Kai Havertz will generate chances. He is a supreme player at being able to create dangerous situations. but those don't always arise when he's reserved. Now, different player, different type of confidence, and different focus, by the way, when he's got the ball. And that, for me, has been his biggest growth.
Yeah. Havertz has been an interesting case study for me over the last year in terms of how much of a difference confidence can make for a player. You know, normally when you think about the difference between a player lacking confidence and a player who's full of it, it's normally just a difference between, you know, a shot going just wide or at the keeper and then, you know, being buried in the corner of the goal, right? But I remember 12 months ago, I would watch Havertz on the ball and I would think to myself, there's no logical way this is going to work, right? Where because and you know, obviously I was wrong about that, but I remember watching him last season where he'd get the ball and then he'd turn around like during a counter when he had acres of space in front of him, he would turn around to pass the ball back and he'd misplace that pass, you know. And now look at him, you know, he's easily one of the best players on the team. Um, you know, I think my personal favorite moment from the Southampton game was when he, you know, won the ball back from one Southampton defender, tussled with another near the touchline, and then basically, you know, passed the ball backwards to Martinelli in midair before falling to the ground, then got right back up and tried to get involved in the move. You know, I think that was kind of a microcosm of the player that Havertz has turned into now. Um, and yeah, it's just really incredible and really impressive to see what he's been able to do. And when we went 1-0 down against Southampton, I think he saw ghosts of the Everton match to end last season, right? Because I remember he scored in that game
Yep.
and just did not care, did not want to celebrate, just picked up the ball, went back to the spot to kick off at midfield. um, got interviewed after the game, and you know, I think the interviewer asked something to the effect of like, "Aren't you encouraged by what you were able to do this season?" And he was like,
Mm.
"I can't even think about that. It's just so infuriating that we didn't win." Um, I think he saw ghosts of that moment and was like, "I'm not dropping points against Southampton. Why we are getting this over the line. We are getting the 3 points. This is not where we're going to lose the Premier League this season." Um, and he and Saka really kicked into high gear, and he started playing angry. You know, scored that first goal 3 minutes after Southampton put the ball in our net. Um, and yeah, he's been terrific, and it really makes me wonder what we're going to do at the center forward position moving forward. I think obviously at some point we're going to need to make an acquisition there. There's been rumors about Sheshko, but do we start building with him in mind as a starting center forward, or you know, I'm really interested to see what we do with him there in terms of his role, or does he kind of stick as the second striker and you know things like that. So yeah, really impressed with Kai Havertz, and looking forward to just seeing how he contributes to the season, and hopefully he'll have a few more performances like that.
One point with Havertz and Saka, I think they've now combined for 8 goals, I think, in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Like considering they've really only played, especially Havertz up front, he's only played for like less than a year really up front. I think that's very promising to see. So that's one to watch, I think.
I'm pretty sure I saw something that said in 2024 so far, he's had the same number of goal contributions as Erling Haaland.
Yep.
Which is insane.
Yeah, I think and you also just have to look at his age, like just to touch on what we do in that position. I mean, look, the only thing that I'll say is when you've got somebody that's so involved in so many aspects of our play, the output becomes a secondary question. But equally, you have to respect the output as actually the first thing that we should talk about with Kai Havertz, because as you point out, JD, he is the exact same goal contributions as Erling Haaland, you know, since his run in the team as a center forward. And when you look at those numbers, again, people say, is he a killer? Well, I'm sorry, the output says it must be at that point. Yeah. So yeah, that's for me, it's something that we don't associate with Kai enough personally. And so, yeah, that needs to be addressed, really.
Yeah. I think my hit from this match is going to be, I would say Mikel Merino, because I don't think actually we've talked about Merino on the pod yet since his debut. But I've been very impressed in the two appearances that he's had to start his Arsenal campaign. Just pulling up his stats real quick here. So he came on and he had 67% of his tackles won, 2 blocks, 2 interceptions, 8 defensive actions, recovery, won 100% of his ground duels. Yeah, I just think overall I've been very impressed by the off the ball side of his game. And I think with Sterling, there's been a bit of an adjustment period, obviously, because he hasn't been playing football regularly for a little bit of time as Chelsea froze him out. He's still kind of getting up to speed with how he play. Excuse me. And Calafiori, I think, still has a few things to work out on the defensive side of his game. Nothing major. I just think, and I think you've said this a few times, George, he's just a little aggressive sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But Marino seems to have slotted in just really seamlessly so far. And I feel like when he steps on the pitch, he almost has that Vince Vaughn, like, I've got it face from Dodgeball, where he just jogs onto the court. He's like, this isn't a big deal, guys. I got it. Okay. But yeah, I just, he has that confidence in him that, or I guess he has that aura, I want to say aura, but he has those vibes about him that really instill confidence when he's on the pitch, makes everything feel a little bit more solid. And I think seeing as, we've conceded a few goals maybe that we shouldn't have recently, seeing as we've been a little bit easier to get at, especially in our midfield, I'm just really encouraged by what Merino has brought, against PSG, against Southampton, where he's just stepped on the pitch, immediately started winning tackles, started winning duels, been a very defensively solid player. And I'm looking forward to his attacking output as well, because I think that will come. For the Martinelli goal, I noticed that he was inches away from getting his head onto that cross from Saka. So just kind of looking forward, just to think that you have Havertz and then Merino kind of near the back post. You have Martinelli beyond them to sweep the ball in if it goes over them. You have, Trossard, or maybe it's going to be Odegaard in the future, kind of sitting on the penalty area to mop up in those instances as well. I think it's really encouraging. So, yeah, I just wanted to shout out Merino because I don't think I've had a chance to mention him recently, and I'm very impressed by what I've seen so far.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, yeah, I'm not surprised by what he's done, to be honest. Like he is, like, he's an experienced player. He's played a long time in Spain, La Liga, and like you've seen his stats every year with Real Sociedad. He's been very, like, he's an all-round midfielder. Like, he does a bit of everything. He does, a lot of defensive duel. He does a bit of chance creation. He gets his fair share of goals. So I think he's just someone who's going to always just come in, slot in, and just do his thing. Like, you never worry about a player like that coming in. Like, they're always going to give you a solid 7 out of 10 most games. And yeah, as you said, like, off the ball, he's been amazing already. I think, yeah, on the ball, there's still more we're going to see from him. I think that we're still going to get used to, the sort of his style of play and how he's positioning and how we can get him on the ball in good areas. But he did play one nice ball to Martinelli, I think, with his right foot, I think it was. Like, he just swept it over. That was a really nice ball. So that's a bit of a showcase of what we can expect to see from him, especially linking with Martinelli, who I thought was very good when he came on as well. We didn't mention him. But I think it's very promising, him and Calafiori with Martinelli on the left-hand side. I think there's a lot of promise there. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him. I'm guessing he's going to probably be starting as soon as the international break comes back. So he'll get a few minutes because he's gone with Spain to the international break. So he'll get a bit more up to speed again. And, yeah, looking forward to seeing what he does.
And the nice thing is Merino isn't really a starter for Spain. So, it's not like with England where you're watching Rice and Saka do 390s in a week.
They never get subbed off either, which is just ridiculous. But yeah,
it's so infuriating.
Yeah.
You guys will be playing San Marino, and you'll keep Rice and Saka on the pitch for 90 minutes.
It's like, come on, you have other good players, but apparently not. Yeah.
Where's Foden? Where's Palmer? Where's Madueke? Put them on, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's another kind of unofficial stock, or not stock rising, but another unofficial hit from all this, which is Martinelli, right? Because I think it wasn't too long ago that we were all pretty concerned about him, right? And there were shouts about Sterling taking Martinelli's spot in the starting 11. There were shouts of Trossard kind of, this is the year that Trossard's going to stay as the starting left wing. And now that you have some stability and some increased quality on that left-hand side with Calafiori, with with Rice and Martinelli starting to work together a little bit, but Marino now transitioning into that spot, it's looking so much better. And I mean, Martinelli, I think in his last few games, I don't remember the number of goal contributions he's had, but
I mean, 4 and 3, I think it is.
Yeah, 4 and 3. Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
He's really come along. He's starting to look confident again. He's starting to put the ball in the back of the net and create opportunities. And I'm just looking forward to him not only rehabilitating his reputation, but also just being able to contribute again to this side in the proper way. I think maybe for the first time since 22-23. And we're really going to need that during the title challenge. So really excited about that. George, we were just talking about how the kind of the upgrades on the left-hand side have really sparked an improved performance from Martinelli over the last few matches.
No, it's been incredible. I mean, look, the tough thing is, I've been talking about this on the timeline for so long in terms of what we need on that side to build connections. And part of the problem is narrative exists on both sides, right? Is Martinelli individually doing enough? And are we platforming our left-hand side in the best way possible? Both of those things have improvements to be made, both in terms of system, but also in terms of what Martinelli can individually do when he does arrive in those moments, which haven't been always decisive. But for me, having a strong-footed overlap down the left-hand side, which means a left footer, by the way, just to be really specific in terms of what that is, has been absolutely crucial. And it's been something that, I'm sorry, the right-hand side has had 2 to 3 years of consistent overlaps down that side. And we simply have not connected with the left-hand side in the same way. In fact, there was graphics going last year that we had the most isolated left-hand side in Europe, not just in terms of the Premier League, but in Europe. And so when I'm sitting there and, I'm trying to have an honest conversation, because typically on Twitter, as one does, it's always battlegrounds, but just factually, we haven't supported that size. And what Calafiori does in terms of being, by the way, our maverick, which I don't know if you guys had touched on, but everybody is looking at Mikel to recruit maverick players or X factor players. Guys, we did it, and we recruited it as center back. How Mikel is that in general? It's actually hilarious, but it's true. It's what he gives us, and he is a maverick. And you look at him in terms of all phases, what he's been able to do. But really, what he's been able to do for Martinelli is get him closer to goal. Simple. I don't want to overcomplicate it with super technical language, but you start to introduce, by the way, Mikel Merino, who we just haven't had the luck of seeing. You've now got 2 left footers down the left-hand side that can connect and provide consistent wide options, whether that's an underlap from midfield through Merino, who already in his really quick cameo I thought was brilliant, not just in terms of his tackles, but even showed that underlap ability. But then Calafiori, who has shown his running capacity both on the inside, on the outside, the impetus that gives us. And I just think that a lot of the Martinelli commentary was incredibly premature. Let's have it right, that he absolutely could have done more, and the chances that he had in those situations, he wasn't the most decisive. He had his head down, and there was a lot of times he overcomplicated things when in the final third. But having these connections there it is no surprise that Martinelli suddenly looks like a very dangerous player. And by the way, it wasn't just in this match. I felt that he's been dangerous for the last 3-4 games. He's really upped his level. And it just comes from getting him inside, closer to goal more often. And that's when we can start to see the instinctual finish of Gabriel Martinelli. And for all of his wasteful qualities that we've seen in the last 6 months in terms of him not contributing with output, I really think that getting that natural goal-scoring instinct back is the biggest concern for me with Gabriel Martinelli, because it wasn't just the work rate, which he's always going to give you. It wasn't just the constant recycling and the threat on the outside, which we know he can give you. But for me, getting him in the box, that was one of our best finishers. And not having that in the box was a problem for me. And so having Calafiori and Mikel Merino down that side is just going to get him in the box more often, closer to goal, and closer to be to make an opportunity to maybe impact the game. And that's all that we need down that side and from that winger position.
Yeah. So let's move on to the misses, and I think there are a couple to choose from in this match, but let's just rattle these off really quickly so we can get to the Man City of the matter. Chitty, I'll go to you first. Is there who's the player from the Southampton match who maybe you're slightly more down on from this weekend? Or it doesn't even have to be a player.
There's a player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know there's been a lot of talk about him, and like, I don't like to scapegoat anyone, of course, but I think we have to talk about Jesus. Unfortunately, I think this was. I mean, I know people have talked about the lineup a lot. I didn't really like the lineup and the whole balance of it, but I thought at least some of the fringe players who could come in, it was a chance to show their quality against, let's face it, it's been the worst team in the Premier League this season, Southampton. And the fact that especially Jesus, the way that he played against Southampton is, I think it was just very concerning in terms of he just doesn't seem to be the player that he was. And not just that, is that like, you know how he used to be such a selfless player. I feel like he was someone who was always, he would link the play well. He'd always, try and get players into good positions, and he's always been a very creative sort of player. But I don't think we're really seeing that anymore. And it seems like the goal drought has got into his head. I think a bit. I think he hasn't scored since January. I'm pretty sure, and like I think it's been 20 games or however many games it's been. And he knows the stats. Like I think that's for sure. All the players know when their last goal was, and I think it has gotten to his head a little bit, and it's affecting the way he's playing. He's not making the right decisions sometimes, and yeah, sometimes he's coming deep, but it's not really working. And I just think when he's playing as this sort of focal point, we just seem to be a lot worse in terms of we just can't really get anything going creatively, or he's just not really a threat at all to defenders. So I think, yeah, it is quite concerning. He can still get back to at least being a useful player. Like at least you saw a few games end of last season where he did provide contributions, like against Bayern Munich with that assist off the bench. But will he ever get back to being that sort of player we saw at the start of 22-23? I'm not really sure at the moment.
Yeah, I'm worried, but I do think we didn't really do him any favors by the way that we set up.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's really a center forward in this system anymore, because if you play Jesus at 9, either you want him to do one of two things. Either you want him to kind of drop in a little bit and link up, although that's not preferable, but that's something that he can do, or you want to try to get him in behind. And we didn't really seem to be trying to do either of those things. And so we just kind of had Jesus kind of bouncing between the center backs, and that's kind of the one thing that he's never really been able to do, which is occupy defenders like that. So he just became really anonymous. I felt like every time he got the ball, he'd either lose it or he'd make a pretty poor decision on it. And like you said, he's kind of had that selfish streak recently. So yeah, I mean, all in all, I am pretty concerned about how he's been playing recently, and yeah, I don't know. It just the vibes around Jesus right now are not great, and so I don't know if Arteta is trying to play him out of that, or if Arteta is just kind of relegated him now to being a bit part player who was just kind of eating up some of the minutes so that we don't have to keep on playing, Havertz Havertz still played, but we don't have to keep on like featuring more important players, featuring more fragile players that we're going to need moving forward. I don't know. I don't know where he stands with Arteta right now, but yeah, he's definitely not the same player that he was first half of 22-23. But George, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's again, you don't want to hammer a player, but I think that he is a player that is understandably frustrated with his position. On a human level, I can kind of understand, by the way, because think about it, he's found himself in the same position that he left Manchester City for, where he's come to essentially be a starting center forward. We propped him as the marquee, and he did provide that. Then legitimately got injured after trying to go to Brazil to represent his country, and off the back of a brilliant season, only to come and be a second fiddle attacker that needs to prove himself and ultimately is not the first choice for an Arsenal team that he left to become that. So on a mental and like human level, I can understand the frustration, but in terms of what he's doing on the pitch and why he's not succeeding, he's got a part to play because, again, I agree he's been incredibly selfish and he's been indecisive. And for me, Jesus is always going to be chaos driven, by the way. You're never going to get, like, even Jesus at his best was not somebody that, was going to follow rules or follow a system or follow anybody. He was going to float to his tune, which I was okay with as long as the chaos was helping us and he was able to be effective. Right now, the chaos is slowing our tempo, slowing our possession, and leading to turnovers. And fundamentally, I also feel that he is a different physical player than he was after injury. I've always said this. I feel he's not lost the agility and he's not lost the ability to turn in those first 5 yards. I think he's just as sharp. But what he has for me is that longer carry. Him doing the big mazy Leicester run is not possible, not because he can't receive in tight spaces, but because I don't think he has the legs to carry that running power after 5 yards. To me, he's losing it and he's lost it. So I think that's really what's hurt him. And that, I'll be honest, you lose the best Jesus with that because you've always found technical players. That's no problem. But what made Jesus interesting was, okay, not only is he mazy and creative, but he's able to sustain this kind of burst over long periods just as much as he could in short periods. And that, for me, is not something this Arsenal team lack. We've got connections. So we're not losing a false nine or a connector in the front line. We've got that already. So the only way that you're going to enter this Arsenal team, by the way, is by being a really top physical outlet, which is why Martinelli plays, which is also why Trossard is preferred as well, because in his small sample, he's been a lot more careful with the ball. He also can become an outlet and has been a lot more influential in terms of that output. That's why those two players are playing in this front line, because if you're going to join Kai Havertz and Bukayo Saka, you need to make sure that you're a top physical outlet and you're doing your defensive work, by the way, and you need to take care of the ball because those two are the superstars and those two are the output superstars. So if you're going to complement that, you need to understand and accept that role. And right now, he's at odds with it. He's at odds with his career, how he's probably got to this position once again, that he's escaped Manchester City for what he felt like. And so again, I have human sympathy to it, but also on a personal level, I'll end with this. I hate to kick a man when he's down, but he will quickly become our biggest wasted resource in the squad. He is not performing at 265 pounds a week, simply. And we need to evaluate this because I don't know if physically we're going to see if Jesus come back to his peak. And I think we are seeing a player of what he is and what his potential is right now. And is that, and could that be, ironically, the City boys who took us to a new level, be the first boys, and I include Zinchenko in this, to be moved on for this new Arsenal? And have they both found themselves in the same position that they left Manchester City for, potentially, for me?
Yeah. I mean, I think that absolutely is the case. And to kind of add to the kind of like the human story for Jesus, we're talking about a guy who not only finds himself in the same position that he was in at City, but we're talking about a guy who, the 2018 World Cup went poorly for him to the point where, Brazil fans were on his back incessantly, and
Mm.
almost to make it up to them, right? He went to the 2022 World Cup, and it sounds like he went not at full fitness with a knee issue, and then, in an attempt to kind of make good to the Brazil fans to do his country proud, he hurt his knee and has effectively, harmed his career maybe long term. So it's really sad for him, because I just think you're looking at a guy who just has not been lucky recently. But yeah, in terms of what we do with him, I think him and Zinchenko are probably the next guys that we're going to try to ship out this coming summer, right? Those are two big resources on the wage bill, especially Jesus. Those are two guys who I still think have some value to them that clubs will be interested in. But ultimately, they're two guys who are becoming less and less important for us. So we'll see what happens on that front. But George, who is your miss from the match?
Difficult one to really put, because to be honest with you, I don't think that there was too many poor performances. I actually thought that Sterling, who got a really bad rep online, actually was better than most people had said. So I wouldn't really call it a miss. If anything, maybe Jorginho, who I just felt like as a whole, he did his job, but he wasn't spectacular. He's not breaking down the door, and I don't think for me he did anything that maybe warranted continual starts, but he also did his job. So I don't think it's fair to even call him a miss. I just think he maintained the status quo and he did what we needed to do. And he was probably the most okay. Whereas I felt everywhere else on the pitch, I could find real benefits to the game. And I do feel that when Declan Rice moved back into the lone anchor, we saw a different impetus in Arsenal. So that was maybe the only thing why it maybe made me a miss. But again, it may sound harsh because I don't think he did something that would, be horrible. I really felt Jesus was the only player I looked at and felt like, okay, you're a sore spot in that team, generally speaking.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's tricky because I'll just go ahead and give my miss, because like you said, I think it is hard to kind of pinpoint any other disappointing performances from the match. For me, I will say Sterling, but I'm going to caveat it and basically say there were just a few final balls that I think he needs to do better with, right? I think my thing with Sterling is sometimes he takes the extra touch and he really doesn't need to, right? Just play the pass, take the shot. If I remember correctly, he was the person who lost the ball ahead of Southampton scoring on us, right? Do I have that right? Yeah. But like you said, between Jorginho and Sterling, like those are two guys that like you really have to try to single out. So yeah, maybe the miss is misses generally. So yeah.
No, he look, I had this rule when like not re-scouted, but like when I did a little video on our channel talking about Sterling, and I just said, I really feel that there should be a rule. The minute that boy crosses the final third, which is about from your goal line to 25 yards out, he has to have a rule that he can't take more than 2 or 3 touches. I don't care if it's a pass or a shot, but that just must be a rule. And he shows in this game. Look, there was a lot of like really strong impetus, and I mean, there's questionable penalty shouts at the beginning. But yeah, like you said, he ultimately is indecisive in front of goal. That's what we've seen from Sterling pretty much throughout his career. But as long as he can keep threatening the back line and like creating doubt, because he does do that to opposition back lines, then he'll have a role. If he wants to beat Martinelli, he needs the output.
Yeah.
And he has the potential to, by the way. I still seen the same physical player from Sterling. So the only thing that I'll say is a difference between Jesus and Sterling is I don't see a physical limit stopping his ability to really impact here. It's all mental, and it's always been mental with Sterling. That's been the story of his career, but ultimately you're looking at one of the top goal scorers for England, period, over his time. So again, I think we saw a lot of the same Sterling that we've seen all throughout his career, but at the same token, he's taking steps to fitness. And I do really think that Arsenal are slow cooking him, because the amount of defensive work that we ask our wingers to do is definitely one of the most demanding jobs in the world. So definitely with you in terms of the misses, that he could have done more to be more decisive when he's in the final third. But I think it's coming, and I'll make a claim. I really think Sterling will be one of the story of the seasons, where I don't think he'll explode now. I just have this funny feeling between Christmas and March, we're going to be talking about a player that we're going to be saying, okay, he's become really important for Arsenal. And I think it comes off the back, for me at least, not just learning the system, but actually gaining the fitness to play our system. And once he's got that, I think he'll be impactful.
I hope you're right. Looking forward to it. I just think long term, I'm not super worried about Sterling. I just think, again, like you said, it's kind of the mental side of his game. Just needs to get more efficient with the final ball. But if there's anyone who's going to make him do that, it is Mikel Arteta, especially considering that this is a guy who worked with him at City and
it started his career, really.
Yeah, and helped him achieve some of the best output of his career. I'm not really all that worried about Sterling. I just think that's the thing I'd like to see him improve on. But Chitty, any thoughts on Sterling or Jorginho?
Yeah, as I said with Jorginho, I think he was just there, to be honest. Like, he did his job, but I don't think you want a bit more like penetrative passing from him in this sort of game. I don't think he really provided that, but it wasn't a bad display. It just wasn't really too effective. And with Sterling, I think, as you say, like, it's good that you can still see he can beat his man very easily. I think he's still bursting down the outside with his pace. He's still getting to the byline, doing these sort of things. So I think that is good that it's still there, and I think it's going to be very useful coming up in certain games, especially the games where we sort of lack a threat in behind. Him coming on off the bench is going to be really key. I think he's also a player that is also a confidence player as well. I think sometimes it just need a big goal in the Premier League to come off for him, and he's going to get going and this sort of thing. Nowhere near as worried as with Jesus. I think Sterling is going to be like, I was very happy when we signed Sterling, and I think he is going to be like a real key player, especially during the winter months when players get a bit more tired and we need to rotate a bit more. I think is going to be really, really crucial. So and with the thing you said about physically, I think it was a Spurs game, I think, when he first came on for Martinelli, and like the difference in the sort of defensive work that Martinelli was doing. I think he was gassing after like literally 5-10 minutes, and I was like, wow, he's really not up to speed here. So I think that sort of process is happening for him as well. So I think definitely in the next few months we'll see a lot better from him.
Yeah, for sure. Well, by the way, Arteta's Arsenal says hi, George. Speaking of City, I woke up yesterday morning and I saw these headlines that were saying, City claim big victory over Premier League in legal battle, and everyone was coming out and saying that City had basically flipped the 115 charges on their head, and it was the end of days for the Premier League. And then, the final award came out for, this arbitration that the Premier League and Manchester City have been kind of locked in concerning associated party transactions, which, for everyone watching who might not be familiar with what that term means, that's basically deals that you're doing with, parties or companies that you either own or have some sort of affiliation with, have some sort of relation to you, right? And so the ruling, I guess, again, I really have a hard time with the phrasing final award, but the ruling was that basically City lost on most of their challenges to the Premier League's rule concerning APTs, right? Which kind of required them to be fair market value, required Premier League clubs to establish that they were fair market value, like put the burden of proof on them to do that. I just, Chitty, have you had a chance to kind of look over some of that stuff, or? Or
So it's actually, unfortunately,
the
I was one of the people who sort of saw the headline, but I had a very busy day yesterday, so I was
yeah,
like, I sort of saw the headlines that had been coming out of like, oh, City claimed victory, and I was like, okay, like I was like, okay, I'll sort of look at this later, but I'm sure there's more to it. But I had like a brief scan of some of the people who had like, written some few threads about it and all,
yeah,
and like it was, I think the media especially did a classical spin off, like,
yeah,
making it seem that City had won, and City had like managed to like prove the Premier League wrong on these huge charges, whereas it was, I think it was 23 out of 25 charges the Premier League won in terms of 23 out of 25 Premier
yeah.
League won, and then City had some minor wins on a couple of the charges related to borrowing, I think, or something it was.
Yeah, basically what happened is this panel came back and said that there were a couple things they didn't like about the Premier League's rule on associated party transactions, and one of them was um, this requirement for teams to show, or for basically they had the burden of proof of showing that their APTs were fair market value. So they came out and said that's not really fair that you put the burden of proof on Premier League clubs. Like if you're going to make this rule, burden of proof should be on you to show that these are not fair market value, which I think is fair enough. All things considered. Because like, do you otherwise you're basically having clubs kind of run around, and every single sponsorship they enter into, like, do you have to go to the Premier League and like have all this
Mm.
paperwork and like hire attorneys and show that it's fair market value? That made sense. And then so that was one thing that they had a problem with, and then the other thing was basically they were like, if you're going to, even if you were going to make teams show that their sponsorships are fair market value, you need to give them access to your database of Premier League club sponsorships so that they know what fair market value even looks like, which I also think made some sense there. And then the last thing that I could see that they really pushed back on the Premier League about was that they basically said, so you're going to go after clubs entering sponsorship agreements with companies or affiliates that they have like a strong relationship with, or not strong relationship with, like, but companies that either they own or they have a partnership with, or like there's some sort of um contractual or otherwise business or corporate relationship between them. If you're going to do that, you should also consider doing something about clubs that have, interest-free loans from
Yeah.
their shareholders. So those are kind of like the three things that they push back on. And there's been a bit of chatter about the shareholders thing because um, Everton, I think, are first with like over 440 something million in shareholder loans. I think Arsenal are second or third in the league in the amount of shareholder loans they have, and it's about 259 million, I think. Um, but as I understand it, I'm not a big finance guy, but as I understand it, that's stuff that can be moved around pretty legitimately, and it shouldn't be a big deal for Arsenal.
I mean, I
But
remember
yeah,
we declared it during, like, it was, I think, COVID time, when like I think Kroenke like basically gave us an interest-free loan, and it was all like very public, I think. And I think
yeah,
if there was anything dodgy about it, I feel like it wouldn't have been so publicly like known, I think. And I think, yeah, if there is a problem, I think we can like translate it. I don't know the finance aspect of it, but I think we can do something so that we can make it not an interest-free loan, but something else, and still have the money.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the best person to talk about that, to be honest, but yeah.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I saw some of the finance experts on football Twitter being like, yeah, that's not a big deal for Arsenal. They can move stuff around. It'll
Mm.
be fine. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Um,
thumbs up, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, George, what did you make of kind of the couple things that this panel pushed back on the Premier League about in terms of their APT rules?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, first off, it's really difficult because I do want to admit that I'm no expert. And I don't think 90%, 99% of football fans aren't. So, I mean, part of what happens is you see a headline and all the football Twitter went to war about the headline. And it was pretty ironic to me that the decision hadn't even been made publicly available when major journalists were making this commentary, clearly pushing a certain narrative, which I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe we'll talk about another time because that has a lot of political motivation from a Saudi government. And I'm just going to say it the way it is. However, in terms of the actual decision, I'm such a nerd. I read the document, and when you read the document, it's very clear who was a winner, and it was the clear Premier League. So, as far as I understand it, let me break it down really simply. When you talk about party transactions and whatnot, fundamentally, what was really clear is, can the Premier League have an independent regulator define what fair market value is?
Yeah.
And why that's important is because if you can't prove that, then that means that City were more than fine to create the value that they proposed their Dubai and other sponsorships were. The whole issue about them cheating, by the way, is that their owners have essentially funded the agreements that they've made. That's another point. That's the 115 charges aspect.
Yeah,
But
we should probably establish kind of like it's a limited connection, but we should probably establish a connection between this and the
yes,
115 charges. Yeah,
which is one aspect.
yeah,
But this didn't relate to that entirely. The indirect point is that, look, okay, if you can establish that the Premier League aren't even right to establish fair market value, then regardless what City have done in terms of cheating, the Premier League have no bounds to even make a comment. Because if
exactly.
that's unfair and that's unlawful, then they can do what they want, which is not morally correct, but lawfully, I would think there's at least a case to be made there. So that was the key thing. And the tribunal, by the way, guys, categorically denied City's claims. They weren't prejudiced against, which was a huge point they were making.
Mhm.
And the rules are absolutely critical to the establishment. Those were the big things that I took away from it. So I sat there saying, okay, so you want to amend very small points related to loans or whatnot, but the tribunal categorically said the framework for defining fair market value as it relates to PSR is needed and vital.
Yeah,
That is the key. So losing that to me was the major thing. And by the way, I do think the stuff that's the Premier League lost on, I actually think City have a point in, if I'm really being fair. I mean, if you're going to sit there and you're going to say, first off, it's illegal to do what you're doing in terms of your owner contributing money, which, by the way, it is illegal. There is logic to say, well, if an owner is just giving you an interest free loan, is that not the same thing as paying another sponsor? And it's a technicality and it's different, but I do think it's important to define. Like if
it
I'm looking in
was
the future.
it was a very clever argument. I
Yeah.
should have probably added at the top of this conversation. I am a licensed law practitioner. Um, Not in the UK, but yeah. So I don't do any litigation or any arbitration or anything like that. But yeah, when I saw that, I thought that was a very clever argument, and I did see
Mhm.
the point that they had made there. And honestly, it makes sense, right? If you're gonna receive an injection of money from your owner, whether that's through inflated sponsorships or through a much more legitimate, interest-free loan, both of those are kind of achieving the same ends.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that was a really interesting point that they made.
Yeah, but the only thing is, like, again, I don't want to claim to be an expert, but far other more experienced people have even told me, and also I just know factually you can convert that to equity really quick. So
Mhm.
financially, clubs aren't in trouble that are doing that, and that was completely by the rules. So this idea that Arsenal cheated or anything is just it's lies. It's not. It was within the rules. So none of that I worried about. As far as what this did for me, mate, the only thing is where do City go from here? Because it's been categorically confirmed that they weren't prejudiced against, which was huge from their argument standpoint. And it was categorically reaffirmed that this process of evaluating fair market value is here to stay. Now, the rules may change and they may need to tweak to add clarifications, but the idea that somebody will independently evaluate fair market value was the entire thing that City were hoping would be thrown out. And that failed, and it failed miserably. It failed on pretty much all of their accounts. So I think as far as what this means for the trial, it almost, for me, guarantees major punishment.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. That's something that I have no idea of. I know what I want, and I know that this will take a long time. In fact, I think that we were actually due to get this decision even as soon as the summer, but it's been delayed as far as October. So I will go as far as saying I don't think that we hear about Manchester City and the consequences until the end of the season. I think things will be going on and there will be attempts, but I think when we get the final decision, we're at a point of basically laying consequences down. It will be the end of the season for me. But I actually do feel that you're looking at something that is unprecedented, and you're looking at a consequence that, for me, and I'll just speak for myself here, guys, it has to be history making, because it's a history making offense.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of that and what Juventus have had to do in terms of their relegation, I'm looking at what Manchester City are accused of, and I'm sorry, it's worse. It's just flat out worse. And if it gets proven, I see no argument how you can look at it. And I'll just end on this. I don't know about you guys, but people will start having conversations about Pep's legacy because of this. If you backdrop his achievements based off what gets proven here, and I know we're not all stupid, guys. We all know that something has happened. I don't want to start to speculate about how deep that is, but something has clearly happened. And we know how irregular that Manchester City have been able to recruit, period. And to a certain degree, Chelsea have been accused of similar things, but no one wants this in the sport. And I do think that Pep's legacy will be hurt by this retroactively. And it may not be fair, but I would argue having somebody in charge knowing that this is happening is just as bad. You may not be the one doing the bad action, but you're complicit by association, and you are the head of the team. And so I really feel that his legacy will be called into question when you look at the consequences of what Manchester City may be punished with.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't hold it against Pep, but seeing him kind of double down at the end of last season and being like, if we did something like I will leave, right? And then his reaction to Arteta saying that he was there for 4 years, he knows the deal, and he was like, "What did McKenna say? What exactly did McKenna say?" I yeah. I don't know. I thought that was so funny. There was a lot of panic there in that moment. But yeah, just to make this clear for people, because there were a lot of folks coming out when that award dropped and when those headlines started coming out and basically saying, oh no, City have won here, right? City didn't win. Associated party transaction rules are still a thing. All that happened was the panel said, you need to fix these couple things in your rule that we don't like, and then you'll be in business. So in terms of what that means for City, I think they've already shown us what it means. Like, you've seen the spin that they've engaged in for the last day now, right? City came out and basically declared victory, George Bush style. They mission accomplished. But yeah, they're coming out and they're trying to spin to win. They're trying to claim victory. But we've just gotten news that their sporting director, whose name I will never be able to pronounce, is leaving the club at the end of the season, right? And there's news of Pep maybe considering his future. There's Kevin De Bruyne actively flirting with Saudi Arabia over the summer. There's Holland potentially leaving. There's several other players. I think Ederson as well was considering a move to Saudi. There's just a lot of smoke around that club right now in terms of people jumping ship all around the same time. And I think it's pretty possible that the fire there is that people know that something's coming, that a big punishment is coming down the pipeline. And George, like you said, I think it's going to be historic because this is something the likes of which we've never seen in the Premier League. And we're talking about a team that's won 6 of the last 7 Premier League titles. So when you have a team that's engaged in this kind of activity and it's led to them creating the most dominant dynasty we've seen in the English top flight, that's a problem. That's something that needs to be addressed. That's an example that the Premier League needs to make out of that team. And so I just think the spinning and kind of the false claims of victory and the pointing at teams that submitted statements against Manchester City, I think that's all an act to hide the fact that it doesn't look good right now for the current champions.
Yeah, I think it's a big stain on the Premier League though if the charges are proven and they get. I mean, they're gonna have to relegate them if even like a few of the charges are proven. They're gonna have to relegate them surely, and I think it's like as you said, like the Juventus thing and that whole scandal. Like I don't know what will happen in terms of the image of the Premier League, but for the fact that the team that has won 6 out of the last 7 titles, and it's all basically a sham, basically at this point. Like I don't know how that's gonna, like how it will affect the Premier League brand and everything. But that is an interesting one.
It's an interesting point because ironically, I just think the product of the Premier League is bigger. The scam will, but like you said, it has to be historic. Like the reason I called this, and I'm so strong that this is a watershed moment for the sport, guys, for me, because I don't think if you fail to provide the consequence that the crime commits, then it's going, for me at least, it's going to introduce things like the Super League. It's going to introduce major questions about where the sport's going. If you're talking about hoping that PSR is fairly adjudicated, then there needs to be an appropriate punishment. And that's the big watershed for me. And it will trickle down from the Premier League to across the world, because I guarantee you, by the way, if the sport has a fair win here with a major relegation, by the way, as bad as it is for the Premier League, Serie A, Bundesliga, Liga, every other league has precedence. UEFA gains power. Now the major governing bodies gain power by a win like this, and the clubs don't. Whereas before, the threat for me of the Super League and the threat came from the clubs having power over the governing bodies. So if we somehow find that, that's maybe the only watershed good moment. But I'm with you. Like it's a stain on the Premier League. It's a stain on English football, undoubtedly. And it's a stain on one of the best managers to have lived. I don't know. I really think that we're going to have tough conversations about Pep Guardiola and his legacy, because most of what he's achieved as special has come with City. I think a lot of stuff that he did brilliantly with Barcelona was special. It was very, very brilliant in its time. And it was definitely one of the best teams that we've seen. And he did brilliantly with Bayern as well. But some of the biggest things that he's done with Manchester City in terms of multiple back-to-back titles, in terms of the titles that he's won both through Champions League, he entered a different echelon of manager with his exploits at City. I believe that what he did with Barcelona made him great and a legend of the game. But he got propped from just a legend to the best with his exploits at City. And if that's marred because you cheated, I genuinely think that there's going to be some serious discussions about not just Manchester City as a club, but I think Pep Guardiola. And that's sad to me, because that's one of the best minds the sport has ever produced, undoubtedly. No matter if he's cheated or not, he's fundamentally changed football. And that is a bigger discussion, actually, to me, more than the crash of Manchester City, because I do believe that as a club, I don't know how you recover from that when, if you're talking relegation, you're talking all these things. It's a very difficult thing to come back from. Just ask Juventus. And that's a historic club with historic prestige that has still yet to really recover from the heights of that relegation, if you're really talking honestly about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, mate. Like, it's big. Like, I'm being very dramatic, but I think it's that big of a consequence and that big of a deal, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, so in terms of the conversation about how big of a stain this is in the Premier League, yes, this is a stain, but if you don't do something about it now at this juncture, that stain will spread,
Yeah.
right? Because now you're actively allowing what's happening to continue. You're actively allowing a fraudulent champion to remain in power. And, I think long term, if details of this case come out and they're damning, but nothing happens to City, I think you will see teams like Arsenal and Liverpool and United kind of think to themselves and maybe say to each other, we're big clubs. We are historic giants of the English game, and we shouldn't have to compete with this. We shouldn't have to compete with a team that is breaking the rules and being allowed to do so and illegitimately beating us to titles all the time. Arsenal and Liverpool more than United, but you get the picture. And I think they'll walk. I think they'll go right back to Real Madrid and basically say, hey, Super League, let's go ahead and chat about that again. And then we're looking at kind of an eternal contamination of the game. So yeah, I think the Premier League have to come down hard here. If you want to talk dramatic, I think we'll be celebrating 3 Premier League titles in the summer.
Do you mean retroact? Like, do you think? You know what? This maybe is a really good exercise to end in. What do you guys think is fair, and what will actually happen as far as punishment goes? We'll do both. What you would want and what you think will happen, because I hate that Twitter thing. It's always the constant. What's your lineup? And you're like, well, Mikel would never do that. It's like, well, I'm just constantly guessing that. We're having a repeated argument here. But yeah, like, what are the 2 punishments for you guys?
I hate those, by the way, when like you give what your lineup would be, and then people are like, "Art Mikel would never do that." It's like, no, I'm the manager here. I'm
That's
the
my
manager.
opinion.
Yeah. But yeah, I think realistically, we're talking about. I'm gonna lowball it. I think realistically, we're talking about a massive points deduction going into next season and being stripped of all titles won during the time frame that we're talking about here. So I think that's basically their last 7 that we're talking about here.
Wow.
What I would want to happen is relegation to League One and then stripping of titles. But yeah, I don't know if I'm interested to see if the Premier League have the stones to come down that hard on City, or if they feel like it's a bit of double jeopardy to take away the titles and to also relegate them. So we'll see. But Chitty, sorry, I cut you off there.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if they will take away the titles, to be honest. Like, I think the relegation, I think, is going to happen. I'm not sure if it'll go as far down as they should go, because I think they should be expelled from the Football League, to be honest, and start again from the National League. I think they'll probably go down a division, probably go to the Championship, which I feel like they can bounce back from pretty quickly, because even if they sell everyone, they'll still have too many resources to struggle in the Championship. And yeah, I think they'll have like a massive fine and this sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think that they will lose their titles, because with Juventus, did they lose their? They lost a couple of titles, didn't they? They lost a couple of titles.
They did.
But I guess that was because it was match fixing, which maybe people might think is a bit more like illegitimate. This is more of like a financial sort of crime, I guess. So maybe they'll be like, okay, on the pitch they didn't do anything wrong per se, so the titles are legitimate, even though financially the way they did it was wrong. That's the reason why I think they probably will keep their titles, but I think they should be stripped.
There's gotta be some texts out there between a Manchester City official and Michael Oliver somewhere.
I mean, Saudi links.
Look, but you know what? For me, is like my argument would be, I hear you, Jitty mate, but my argument would be you lied, you cheated to get the resources to get those players on the pitch.
Mm.
It's a form of cheating. Like for me, what's really bad about match fixing is it's cheating. You're cheating the right to the game, right? And fundamentally, Manchester City have cheated their way to accumulating a squad capable of winning those trophies. That's what's happened here for me. So I'm with you. I want them expelled. It's never been done before. And I would have this energy if it was Arsenal or anybody, like to cheat on this scale, this consistently over many years, by the way. That's what this is, by the way. It's not just, oh, I had 1 or 2 years of an issue. It was intentional cheating of multiple years throughout the entirety of your tenure. And by the way, you did it because you wanted to be humble. Humble Manchester City have come from the ashes to do this on the backs of their own hard work. No. And I'm a simple man. I think that we agree to 2 things, by the way, in sport. And one of them is agreeing to the rules.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing. It's not about the result. It really isn't. Otherwise, what's the point? Why are you invested in a game, by the way, if you're not going to care about the rules? If we're just going to have people on steroids winning the Olympics, if we're just going to have people able to cheat their way to outcomes, why do we invest in it? Why does it matter? The reason we invest in it is because we have this understanding that no matter what, there's the hope that somebody can do something more. There's the hope that there's a Leicester out there. There's a hope that an underdog can compete. And that's huge to me. So yeah, I want them expelled. What I think will happen, I absolutely think relegation. I really don't know if they'll take away the titles. That's something that's I think needs to happen. I don't know if they do. And I think it's because I don't even know how they go about reassigning those titles. And I think that's actually the bigger issue, not that City deserve it or not. I think that's going to be the bigger question mark for the Premier League about, do they retrospectively give those titles to teams that have lost out in that period? So that's what I don't know, but I think they 100% get relegated. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's lower than the Championship, personally. Only because the crime was so big, and based off what Richard Masters has attempted to do with point deductions, like the level of punishment means that he's going after relegation. I would hope he's as aggressive as losing the titles. I just don't know, would English football accept that as a whole?
The way I think about it is the Premier League loves to celebrate its champions. We're still hearing about United championships, and Liverpool's win is revisited a lot, and I don't see how the Premier League would want to have that be part of its legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Agree with you.
I think if given the chance, and I'm with you in that I don't know how they would handle, who takes the title in the event of them being stripped from City. Hopefully, it's just everyone who finished in second place, and we pick up a couple retroactively. But I don't think the Premier League would want to live with 6 of the last 7 champions being a team that has so blatantly cheated and made them look like fools.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think they're going to want that to be part of their legacy. I don't think they're going to stand for that being celebrated even after the outcome of this case. So I think they'll try to do something about that. But I mean, yeah, I think probably the priority here is punishing City like in the immediate future and enacting that relegation, which I agree. If you're going to relegate them, it's probably going to be at least 2 leagues down. But maybe it'll be expulsion. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah. I think that one other reason why they'll have to be bring the hammer down is because obviously the previous charges that have happened to Everton and Nottingham Forest and other teams where they've been given points deductions based on like one charge or two charges maybe. So if that's what you're doing for one or two charges, and I think City have some of the same charges as well, but
They do.
multiple of those. So it's like if that's what you're doing for one or two of those charges, if you have 115 charges, that is so many charges.
It does really actually make expulsion the only legitimate thing. And then when you talk about retrospective title and stuff, like I think there's an argument there. I would do it. I'm with you, Sham. Like it's 100%. They're fake titles. They are.
Yeah.
That's what it is to me. But there's at least argument there about it. But for me, if you're doing like okay, you steal one apple, you get 1 month of jail. If you steal 115 apples, you get 115 months. Like if you're trying to do proportionate things here, based off what's happened to Everton, Nottingham Forest, and what they're even going to have to do, by the way, with Chelsea, who have escaped this conversation, even though they've actually reported themselves to the Premier League. I wonder what that punishment's going to be. But I think it has to be expulsion from the National League entirely, personally, proportionate.
Well, and it's not just 115 times what Everton and Forest did, because Everton and Forest came clean with the league.
Yeah.
Whereas City actively tried to hinder any investigations, and they weren't cooperative, and they didn't turn over the books until, it became a whole thing. So I think that's a multiplier in itself. So, I mean, I think at this point in time, and, I'll knock on wood here because I'm still, there's always just the slightly superstitious part of my brain that's just like, what if the worst thing happens? Yeah, exactly. But I think at this point in time, I would be pretty shocked if it was anything other than, or I would be pretty shocked if it was like a slap on the wrist or less. I think we're going to be looking at something really serious happening in the City. It's just that the spectrum of what that can be is pretty wide.
I'll just say if it doesn't happen, just to play that part,
sure,
I would lose interest in the sport. I'd go that far. Like, legitimately, if I see a slap on the wrist or even an idea that Manchester City could continue after doing it, I would lose all hope in there being a fair competition with football. Which, by the way, I'm not naive to think that cheating doesn't happen, and it happens in all leagues. And there's conspiracy, and when there's this much money, guys. Let's not delude ourselves. There's corruption in every facet of life. We know this, by the way. But my point is, on such a huge public scale, to completely say yes, cheating is okay. That's when my heart wouldn't be in the sport. It's that big of a moment for me. And at least give me the illusion that you're doing your best to control cheating. Not that cheating will never exist from this point on. It will. There will be collusion. There will be corruption. This is sport. But at least give me the illusion that you care about it, if that makes sense. And if I don't see that, I can't invest in a sport that I do love.
Yeah. Or just let there be a line. If just set a line somewhere, I'll put it like this. And by the way, I'll throw this comment in here. This is what you'd call a shit show. I hope you're not talking about the pod, but if you're talking about the situation at hand, then yes, this is what I'd call a shit show. I'll put it like this. If City get off scot-free, or if City get a super weak punishment, if I'm Florentino Perez, I am on the phone with the Cronkies, with FSG, with Ineos, probably with Dan Levy the morning after.
Yeah, Super League.
Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, is this really what you want to stick around for? Come to Madrid. Let's talk. So I think it's going to be really bad for City, and if it's not bad for City, it's going to be bad for the Premier League. And those are kind of the two choices you're looking at.
I mean, the Premier League definitely feels that pressure as well, because they know the big clubs, what they want and like what they're pushing for. So they're going to feel that pressure as well, to one club versus these huge institutions that literally hold up the Premier League, the Premier League brand and everything.
Good point.
So I think they're going to have to keep that into account. And do their job in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and we are going to stay abreast of the subject throughout the season, and yeah, we'll see when that ruling comes out, because that's going to be an absolute game changer, a historic moment for the sport. So we'll keep on top of that, but we're a little past the hour and a half mark. I've kept both of you for so long at this point. So thank you, Chitty. Thank you, George, for being here. Thank you so much for giving your time to come talk footy, come talk about the Arsenal. Thank you to our just over 3,200 people watching live. Thank you for being here with us. Really do appreciate it. Love each and every one of you. It really is not lost on me, what a privilege it is to have all of you join us live and watch and be a part of the conversation. So, thank you to everybody. You can follow Chitty at Chitty AFC. You can follow George at GeorgeV_AFC. You can also catch George on the Canon podcast. You guys do great work over there. And it sounds like you got a full slate of content coming up this week. Looking forward to it. And you can follow me at Shamsdale. You can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, 5-star review would be really appreciated. Also, if you could, I guess you can follow podcasts on those platforms now. So if you can do that, that would be great. And just thank you again for being here. And so we will be back with you next week. We will be doing worst takes of the break. And if no other significant news comes up, maybe we'll do some power rankings for the Arsenal players, see where we are with like some MVP rankings. But until then, be a gooner, not a goon, and we will talk to you soon. So until then, bye. Bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Right.